I'm hanging in there, as they say. It's my pleasure to be on. I really appreciate it. Opportunity to share some of this outrageous information, unfortunately, that I've come across here once again. For those people who don't know who I am, I've been around for a long time. I've been chasing bad guys in government for 30 years. To get into the front part of my story, it takes quite a bit of time. So what I would simply say is this: many years ago, in the 80s, 86, 85, that period of time, I had a company. It was just it was actually a manufacturing company of toys. Had nothing to do with politics, could care less, pretty much like the average American. I was just trying to make my way in the world, so to speak. And what happened, putting this into extremely compressed bit of information because I don't want to waste too much time on it, I merged my company with a company that already was in existence. It was presented to myself and was, in fact, an importing company of cheap watches, and it was perfect for my toy company. I merged with them, but the reality was it was only one of several companies that were run and operated by a man named Gary Best, who was, in fact, a supplier of weapons for the National Security Council, the NSA, and CIA. He supplied weapons along with partners of his who were the former generals that literally ran the entire Vietnam War and had run and supplied weapons for all of the little wars since the Vietnam episodes in the 60s. And what they were doing with my business, which I found out to my surprise, they have been doing it for many, many years. These covert operatives actually take companies like my own, my little toy company, and utilize them as covert front operations under which they can operate all around the world without drawing suspicion to themselves, supplying the weapons for all the small variety of covert operations that the United States maintains on a regular basis and makes the huge amounts of gold and profit into the pockets of those people that are involved. And that's how I got into it. And what had happened, I was at that time, those of you that are old enough to remember, that was during the period of the Iran-Contra scandal that was, of course, included, which most people never knew, huge amounts of drugs being traded by our Central Intelligence operatives for weapons that went into the wars all over the globe, actually, at that time. And of course, it was Nicaragua, and the Contras was the target initially at that point in time. So that's how I got into it. And of course, there's tremendous amount of fantastic, complex, exciting, and interesting stories that followed. Because what took place, I became a sworn witness, a deposed witness in the Iran-Contra mess, and then 2 or 3 other legal actions connected with that. I was a witness. And then on the basis of that, afterwards, every time there were similar kinds of events going on, drug smuggling and swap for weapons being transported illegally, and actions of different sorts around the globe, senators and congressmen, a few of them that were good, and there are very few, would contact me and say, "Hey, Mr. Fletcher, do you have anything that connects this one with that one? Can you help us out with this? Do you have information on these people carrying out events over here and over there?" And I ended up assisting in as many as 8 to almost maybe even as many as 12 above secret and top secret and standard inquiries into all of these outrageous events. And and it also included becoming a candidate for the United States Congress in 1990 in the state of Florida, running against a corrupted congressman at that time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I got into it. And since then, I've been chasing and been heavily involved with whistleblowing and witnessing and investigating a multitude of these types of related events.
Yeah,
now,
your story is
throw
quite
it back to you. Go ahead. Excuse me.
I said your story is quite fascinating. There's a show on the air right now, a television show called Sons of Anarchy about gun trafficking and drugs and things of that nature. Working with the IRA, that's dangerous business. Especially when you're involved with the government. Back in those days, I think people had a little more trust in the government than we do now. So you've transitioned, into Nibiru, your new video, Incoming Nibiru. I want to connect these two events because if you peruse your website, BobFletcherInvestigations.com, you have a number of interesting photos and a great thesis out there regarding these underground bunkers that the government or someone is building out there. Is the cash connected from the gun running and the drugs connected to building these bunkers, or
well, it all is. Here's what happened. Again, realizing that I've just been up to my ankles, well, up to my neck in it, actually, I guess, for 30 years. And a couple of years ago, actually back in the 90s, I had testified before the United States Senate Intelligence Committee relative to several different things. But going back that far, first off, I had always constantly had people, like I indicated a few seconds ago, I always had people contacting me, and some of them were CIA operatives themselves. Some of them were retired. Some were military officers. Some of them were intelligence operatives at different levels. There was even an organization in Washington of retired intelligence agents that had even brought me in at one point in time and made me an honorary member. And I think I was maybe the only person that was an honorary member to retired intelligence agents. And these guys were what I would consider mostly the good guys. Unfortunately, corruption in our government goes all the way up to the presidency and then comes back down. And it is so profuse at this point in time that if you believed anything at face value that you hear on the news, you're a fool. And that's terrible, but that's a reality, period. End of story as far as legitimacy in government. We have a secret cabal that's been running everything for years and years and years. A lot of conspiracy nuts, as they like to call us, those of us that look into this. Many of them have been aware of and have pursued the interfacing of criminality all the way up to the presidency. There's no question about it, none whatsoever. And many of the inquiries, including, I must say, going back to the simple Iran-Contra inquiry, okay, the big deal that was totally covered up at that point in time was the direct connections of drug smuggling with C-130s airplanes flying in after dropping weapons off in Nicaragua or some other location, or Panama, Manuel Noriega's Panama, dropping weapons off there to be utilized in these third world wars and swapping out for tons of cocaine and heroin and raw material, dope, narcotics, flown in and delivered at our Air Force bases in the United States. Offloaded, they were considered to be central intelligence operations. Not even the military officers that ran those bases even knew what was going on, because it was above their level of clearance, and they were just told it's a CI operation, don't even open the door. And the planes would be flown in, they would bring in tons of narcotics, offload them into a closed hangar, put them on a big truck, and ship them out, and they would end up in the streets and in the blood vessels of our children around the United States. This is not just somebody talking about maybe this is what happened. All of this is verifiable. It's a done deal. I have one inquiry that people can get that's on a DVD form. It's called The CIA and Drugs, and I believe that's what the title is now, CIA and Drugs. Get that. I had supplied that report to Sonny Bono, who was a good guy in Congress and was murdered 15 days before he was going to open up a major congressional inquiry with my material. Up on the ski slopes, they told you he ran into a tree. That's a lie. He was murdered. He was beat over the head, probably with a 45 or a 9mm pistol, and bludgeoned to death and dragged up against a tree. Most people including police agencies, had no idea that we were about to break open a congressional inquiry that would have led drugs right up into the White House. Now, putting all of that light stuff aside, let me tell you what happened. A few years ago, I realized that things had changed in many directions in Washington. And instead of just stealing, embezzling, and shortchanging and doing whatever is necessary to steal a few $1 million a month for their criminal pockets up in Washington, things had changed. They were now moving and fraudulently getting hands on billions of dollars, not just a few million to put a nice new mansion that they live in Panama for their holidays. They weren't just doing that any longer. They were now moving huge amounts of money that were just disappearing from varieties of budgets in Washington. And then I watched, to my surprise, the absolute shock, actually, the day before the 9/11 event, the terrorism event in New York and Washington, Donald Rumsfeld, the fellow that was in charge of the Department of Defense at that time, made an announcement at a congressional hearing that the Department of Defense over the previous few years had lost $2.3 trillion with a T. Now, because of the timing of that announcement, basically just said they just couldn't find it. It was just gone out of the budget over a period of time. That's a mind-boggling amount of money, folks. You cannot launder $1 trillion, even if you were Pablo Escobar, the head of the big South American drug operations. You can't launder $1 trillion. Then a short time, and of course now because of the events that took place, which by the way included, this is what's really great, included at the Pentagon the destruction of the files and material related to what I just told you about. The trillions of dollars that vanished from the Department of Defense, it happened to have been in the part of the Pentagon that was burned up. By the way, no airplane ever hit the Pentagon. It was some type of, more than likely, actually a missile. There was never anything related to an aircraft located inside the building that they said was run into by an airplane. So forget that. And that's another outrageous kind of story connected to that whole artificial terrorist event that took place in the Pentagon and in, of course, New York City. Put that aside. Now, we have a short time later, I'm watching one of the inquiries at the congressional level, and the lady who was supposedly in charge of overseeing all of the international banking distribution for the Federal Reserve, one of the senators and congressmen asked her, said, I understand that there's $9 trillion that is unaccounted for on your records. Could you answer that? And she looked a little questioned. I think they had to wake her up or something. I'm not sure. But anyhow, her response basically was, well, yes, it seems that there's about $9 trillion that we can't identify what European banks were given the money. So I'll have to get back to you on that question. So now we have the a $9 trillion that just sort of vanished someplace. Now we're not talking about small stuff like 20 million at one time in $100 bills that was shipped by the George Bush administration over to Iran, Iraq during that mess, and it just disappeared. It was delivered on flatbeds out of the back of a supply airplane, and it just vanished. Nobody ever even tracked that down. Of course, trying to track $100 bills in giant stacks on a transporting pallet is probably pretty difficult over in the Iranian, Iraq areas at that time. That's nickels and dimes, for crying out loud, compared to what we're talking about here. So then I look, and I realize Ron Paul had come forward during the period of time when all the money was getting, when they had the crash, was 2008, 2010, when the worldwide financial thing was feeling a squeeze. The Ron Paul had asked for an audit. He asked for an audit of the Fort Knox gold. And he was told that he had no right to even ask for an audit. The way it was originally set up, that nobody has oversight at all with the ability to inquire as to how much gold was there, where it was, what was coming in, what was going out, etc. That no one in the Congress or the Senate has any right to inquire as to the an audit for the gold in Fort Knox.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. You know,
okay.
recent events in the world over the last couple of years. You know, as the economy seems to be decreasing, we hear the stories of Germany and many European countries who have entrusted us with their gold over the years have requested
Yes.
it back. And there's been stories that particularly, I think the Germans had a particular mark on their gold bars that was not there any longer. And, you know, there was some actual refusal at one point to deliver the gold.
No, it's more than that. It's worse than that. And it kind of, again, and it was my next sentence, actually. Following Ron Paul and a couple other senators and congressmen asking, which they do quite often, asking for some kind of an audit of the Fort Knox and gold, they have always been turned down, and it's because it is a fact. The way it was originally set up, when they set the entire situation up with the oversight of the Fort Knox, it was set up on the basis these are a group of non-governmental banks that actually have the oversight of everything going on with Fort Knox. And it was created with this group of banks, private banks, and again, the very bylaws included the fact that nobody could snoop into it. So now what you're talking about is, in fact, that when the money got tight, around the 2010, 2008, that period of time, Germany was the first one to step forward. Many nations, most of the nations of the world, as a matter of fact, that had any amount of gold many years ago and over the years, they have entrusted it in the Fort Knox bank vaults. It was put in there by ton loads, actually, literally tons of gold bar brought in from all the different countries. In Germany's case, I believe the figure was 1,536 tons of gold that we are holding theoretically for the Germans. And the reason that these different nations, several of them around the world, had come forward and did that with us was because they were worried about radical small groups and military arms and et cetera, people that were, in their own country that they were worried about that would just zip into a bank or two that might be holding all of their gold and would just take off truckloads, trainloads of their bullion. So they put it in the United States Trust, all right? Now, when the money's all of a sudden gotten into the global crashing configuration in 2008 and 10, around that time, these countries had come forward and said, hey, we need some of our gold. We need a few tons of our gold back, okay? And so we want to make a withdrawal. They were told exactly the same thing by the Federal Reserve. They were told, we can't supply you with gold at this time, and if you will get back to us, and this is important, in 2020, it was 7 years from when they requested their gold. So get back to us in 2020, we can supply you either with a real good up-to-date audit or some of your gold. Now, as many as 7 nations had stepped forward between 2010 and 2011-13, in that period of time, and they've all had the same answer from the Federal Reserve, and that is, we can't even talk to you about anything like that right now. It's too convoluted, and blah, 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 blah. I don't know what story they told them, but they did tell them to get back in 2020. All right. The bottom line is, folks, all of the gold. Now, when I say all of the gold, there are a few vaults that still have, under the Federal Reserve, that still probably have physical gold, so they could show you some. But for the most part, the gold is gone. All the gold has been removed. Now, we get back, and I'm looking at 2.3 trillion vanished with the Department of Defense that was admitted to. 9 trillion is unaccounted for by the Federal Reserve on their international lending and assistance banking programs. Now, that's our money, folks. That's our money. Now, if they're doing good handling of it, that's fine. But if you create an organization, the Federal Reserve, that tells you to take a hike when you want to know what's going on with your money, we should really be upset. Now, during the same period of time, another guy got upset, and he was the gentleman that was in charge of the International Monetary Fund. This guy was in line to become the premier of France or the president of France or something like that. He was a billionaire himself. He came forward on the behalf of the International Monetary Fund to the Federal Reserve and said the same thing as our senators and congressmen. He said, we need to see what's in there. We want an audit, or we're going to go before the United Nations and file a formal complaint against the Federal Reserve System, because nobody knows where their gold is. He got the same answer. He was told, you're just going to have to wait. We'll let you know. We'll get back to you on your request. So he was getting on his own aircraft in New York City. Physically, I think, was seated in his plane, ready to take off. Now, this is a billionaire unto himself. He was seated in his plane, ready to take off to fly back to France or Belgium or wherever he was, Geneva, Switzerland. And they yanked him off of the New York police and FBI, yanked him off his plane, arrested him, and pulled him back into New York City and charged him with sexual misconduct and attempted rape of the maid at the Hilton Hotel or wherever he was staying in New York. So what they did was charge this guy, and again, I can't tell you how high a level this personality was, who was questioning the Federal Reserve and the gold. They arrested him. They cut deals with him. This guy wasn't chasing the maid. This is what the charge was. He was chasing the maid and making sexual advances to the maid in his hotel room. A billionaire from France in charge of the International Monetary Fund? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what his sexual preferences was, but I'll darn well tell you he wasn't chasing the maid around the bedroom of the Hilton Hotel,
well, I think
or whatever place he was staying at.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Strauss-Kahn, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that was a famous story out there, and
absolutely,
and it kind of went away. It was one of those things.
But of course it did. It went away because what they did was they said, well, you have a choice. We're going to put you in prison for sexual whatever, felony, blah, 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 here in New York City someplace and throw away the key, or you're going to shut up about this Federal Reserve stuff, get on your plane, go back to Switzerland, and we don't want to hear from you again. And the guy ended up, of course, losing his position and all the rest of that. Okay, so I'm only using this to show you how serious this charge of no gold left in Fort Knox, how real that is. That is real. So I started looking at it. I thought, I have seen him steal millions and millions day in and day out of Washington. Every manner of conversion and illegal contractual agreements for defense contracts and everything you could possibly imagine. All right, changing the books, charging $2 billion for an airplane and only cost $1 billion, and then splitting it up between themselves, the difference, and that's gone on for years. But then I realized, there's some kind of a real serious red flag here, because what we have is trillions of dollars, particularly if now we're talking that the gold is gone. And again, like I said earlier, you can't just money launder that. Where in God's name was that money going? Where in the world could that money have gone? And then I remembered a few people would come back to me, and I remembered information I had gotten as far back as 1992, I think it was, the first time I heard about underground facilities. And then I had recent people that now, coming forward to me a couple of years ago and saying, boy, look at these pictures I've got in an underground facility. Boy, do you realize how many there are? Do you realize how big those are? And then people came to me and said, friends of mine that had business in the freeze-dried survival foods, and they said, we can't buy any survival foods. We can only get part of our orders because the government is buying tons and tons from every producer of survival foods in the United States. It's government contracted, going underground in the underground facilities. So I looked in a couple of other directions and doors that I had open and snooped around. And I recalled my own venture in '95 when the Denver airport first broke open. I had been told for a year by a guy that was directly involved with the financing, et cetera, of parts of the construction at the Denver airport. He had told me back in the '90s that it was an underground facility, a giant underground facility at the Denver airport. When it was opened to the public in '95, and by the way, I have to add a caveat to that today, they're still working on it. They're still building it underground. I went in 1995 with a lady, and the two of us were able to sneak in and get on board a tram that went down throughout the underground parts of the underground facility in 1995 at the airport in Denver. It's true. I have photos. I have films. End of story.
So you're telling us that the rumors of the underground nature at the Denver airport is true, that there's actually
110% true, and they're still building it today as we speak. But that's just one.
But that's huge news, that's gigantic, that's because there's so many New World Order of symbols and symbology paintings and things.
No,
like
well,
that.
And that's something else. It's literally satanic painting and murals, which, by the way, I haven't been there in a couple of years. I understand they have been painted over, and I haven't been there myself physically. But the paintings and all that's literally satanic is the only way you could describe it. But here's the point. There are 103 underground facilities to the best of our information. This is in the United States. Some of these are gigantic. Some of them are not all that big and not all that important. But they are bringing in and have been bringing in foodstuffs and survival goods on 18-wheelers and trains for years. Now, they've gone into the NORAD facility in Cheyenne Mountain, taken over that facility, which was for many, many years in the side of a granite mountain there, Cheyenne Mountain. It was, in fact, the NORAD communication center for keeping track of any possible nuclear attacks in the United States. Basically, that was what it was built for. That has been taken over. All of that part of the watching for nuclear attacks has just been moved over to Peterson's Air Force Base, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head. This is, by the way, everything I'm mentioning here today is in my double DV that's available right now, okay? The one that's called Incoming, the Story of Nibiru.
Yeah, and by the way, Bob, we have that link up on our website right now, theweekendconspiracy.com. We have it linked to your website and also the information there to get that video. So please carry on, sir.
Okay, and that's fine. But all of these things now, because I've got some great stuff to tell you that we haven't even gotten into yet. And let me know how we are with time here as we move on. I'm trying to compress years of information into a couple of minutes here, a couple of hours.
Yeah, we go into we have an open-ended show. We about 2 hours generally, but as much time as you need, sir. We can make room for you.
Okay, fine. And again, I'm just kind of doing this boom, 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 boom. It becomes a little overbearing almost. But I want to, and I'm not going to hit on everything I can't. But there's so much to this; it is mind-boggling. So what happens here? I have the one-on-one information. I had truckers. In fact, this goes back. The first of my knowledge on this. See, goes back to 92, 94. I mean, I had truckers that were coming to me at that time, and I was involved with all these other outrageous things. I was even contracted by Manuel Noriega's lawyers to do a report for them in the midst of all of this stuff. So, I mean, that's how heavy at the level that I've been functioning.
Well, let me just stop you and ask you about that before
Sure.
we move on past that. I read some stories, years ago. I've been in the conspiracy business for a very long time. The radio show is a fairly new thing for us. But, I've read about Oliver North, Manuel Noriega, the Medellin cartel, and not that you're directly involved with them, but you're close enough for me.
I was. Not involved in criminality,
right.
but in the inquiries. But go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're arm's length with those guys. I mean, is there not a bit of fear somewhere down and deep down inside of yourself that not only that you're dealing with these government individuals, but these criminals, these drug lords? I mean, the kings of kings in drug business. How do you sleep at night thinking about these individuals?
Oh, that would be the worst thing you'd want to do, is think much about these individuals. But it doesn't bother me now. There's been 3 attempts very specifically to kill me over the years, mostly quite a while back. The last was in about 1997 in Los Angeles, California, when where I was literally struck with what was rather top secret weapon. I guess still is, but it's an electronic device that I was shot while I was asleep in my bedroom, and it blew my left arm apart at the shoulder internally with no marks on the outside whatsoever.
Yeah,
and
yes.
It's an electronic type of a thing.
I've read about this story years ago in a magazine, I believe. But
yes,
and the one thing, I am from the originally from near the area where you think that weapon was developed, Oak Ridge National Laboratories. Do you still think that that's where that weapon was developed?
Oh, I don't know. They have laboratories for developing things all over the world. The big deal now is that what was the old concept of the death ray of the particle beam weapon is completely and totally accomplished. The particle beam weapon, which was some of the old Nikola Tesla, and including the weapon I talked about that hit me, is part of the Nikola Tesla developments way back, in the 1800s, the stuff that he originally conceived. The particle beam, that was, and I'm not going to get into this at all, but that was literally applied to the Twin Towers, the destruction of the Twin Towers, along with other things, okay? But the particle beam is a reality, and it has the capability from an aircraft or a standing location or a satellite or whatever to triangulate, and that literally turns material goods, let's say bricks and iron, into dust, literally. It just can strike it and turn it into dust. All right, and I'm not going to get into more of that. That's a whole. It gets away from what we're talking about. But I got bad news. That's all been accomplished, and according to the fellow that was the head of Skunk Works, where they manufactured all our spacecraft and everything, all of that, on his deathbed. Basically, I'll get into that a little bit later. But he said we've been flying among the stars for years. That's got nothing to do with rocket ships and that junk that you watch down at Cape Kennedy. So anyhow, we'll put that on the back shelf also. The above top secret weapons are beyond your wildest dreams. And this fellow that ran Skunk Works literally said that if you could even imagine any type of a weapon and space travel and all of that, we have finished it already, and we have done it. And it's all being maintained totally out of everybody's point of view and their knowledge. So let me move forward. So what we have now is 100, at least 100 to 103 of these facilities. Some of them very large, some of them not too large. However, the point is they've been built as survival locations for the limited few, for the elite at the highest levels. All right. None of maybe somebody that I've met that has a ticket to get in there, but mostly our friends across the United States, none of them have the ticket to get in to the underground facilities when the time comes. Now, it includes, by the way, things that people are just generally not aware of. The third level of a brand new 3-level construction that went on in Washington under the White House There's third level down, which is top secret, not available to anybody to get down there to even look. It's an area considered to be normally told to be a visitor's area where you can come in and you see all kinds of stuff, and they have these tours and things of that sort. The third level down could accommodate 3,000 people in a ready emergency for survival. The bigger ones, which are around in several locations around the country, handle as 10, 15, and as possibly as many as 18,000 people under one big hole in the ground. All right, et cetera, et cetera. These are completely set up for long-term existence of a limited few. They include spas and all of the fanciness. They include full operative hospitalization, hospital configurations, et cetera, et cetera. They are as uptown as a whole could ever be underground. They are built in many locations under the idea of being able to withstand the equivalent of nuclear-sized explosions or events that would be big enough to be equal to a multi-nuclear attack, all right? But it's not necessarily nuclear that they're worried about. Some of these facilities are linked up with other facilities underground. I've had several truck drivers who have made deliveries that said they had traveled 800 miles underground in the tunnels to make deliveries between facilities. These are, and by the way, in the DVD, I have stills and motion pictures of what I'm talking about. Now, I also have a list on my website of generally probably most of the underground facilities, but there may be some that I don't have. The facilities also have mag-levitated, that's magnetic levitation trains in some areas that can travel between sites underground in excess of the speed of sound.
Thanks for tuning in to this show. You're going to listen to the 1220 broadcast. Bob Fletcher is the guest. Just want to make sure we get it clear out there. Everyone goes to the website and checks out the survey for next week's year-end show, because we have a lot of questions out there that we want to cover next week. Best show of the year, best caller of the year, guest of the year, story of the year, things of that nature. We'd appreciate your input going out there and filling out that survey, and maybe we'll have a little bit of fun with it next week. By the way, don't forget to go to the website as well and sign up for the newsletter. That is how we'll tell you who's going to be on the show, what times, and things of that nature. As always open lines, 803-610-7643, or email us at theweekendconspiracy@yahoo.com. If you got any intel out there or suggestions, we appreciate you listening. Hey, have a Merry Christmas and a safe holiday.
Now, what I looked at after finding out and realizing that, then I started snooping around on an international basis, because people had said, hey, Bob, they're doing some of these things in other countries, just like what you're talking about. First one I found was a thing called the International Seed Vault. The International Seed Vault is located in Norway, cut into the side of a granite mountain on an island. It is cooperatively constructed by several nations. It holds all of the seeds required to regenerate the growth of vegetation on the face of the earth after it has been totally annihilated from the face of the earth. It's called the International Seed Vault. I have it on my DVD, but you can probably find that, because that's a not secret kind of a thing that you can probably find on your computer.
How does Monsanto allow that to go on, sir?
They probably own it.
They probably do. Yeah, that's probably
of course. Well, hey, you got to understand, everything's eliminated from the face of the earth. Monsanto's best seeds don't mean a whole heck of a lot, do they? Okay.
That's true.
So, additionally, in the area of what is called I guess it's, I'm trying to think of it exactly, and I apologize. I'm just having a little brain thing here right now. But I think it's in Arkansas, where they have a huge underground facility. All right, for many, many years, some of it's been utilized openly, so to speak, as underground storage for a variety of goods. But it had all the time, at the same time, for at least the last 20 to 30 years, has been being converted into one of the largest underground facilities that there is. And above ground at that location is the second biggest private residency ever constructed in the United States. And it literally is registered. It's registered as a private residence. The problem is, hold on one second, I'm going to try and get the location while I'm talking to you. But this private residence was built technically by a fellow that is a Central Intelligence agent. It is on 500 acres. It's the second or third largest individual home in the United States. It is built to be atomic bomb proof. The walls of it, it's like a castle. It has the walls of this place are 3 to 4 feet wide, thick, with steel enforced, etc., and a special brand new polymer cement, etc., that can actually handle the equivalent of an atomic bomb down the street. Yeah, okay.
Is this the guy's name? Last name is Huff, I believe, isn't it? Huff?
That's correct.
Huff?
All right. Now, the point is, this probably, or very likely, when the time comes, when those people get the word to go underground into their mole holes, this may be one of the facilities that will function as a possible coordination of information, or a center, if you will, for some of the other underground facilities. It certainly is involved in one manner or another, in my opinion, with this. There's no reason, and it's right above the underground storage and facility that I was talking about, which is gigantic, huge facility. Now, I started looking into it. I found so we found the sea fault. All right, that's in Norway, actually located. I looked around some more. People sent me information, and I found out that China and Russia had been doing the same thing. And in Russia,
can I stop you just for 1 second? Let's just go back to Arkansas for just a second. We've got Bill the Clintons. Hillary is not going away. She's going to come back up in 2016. Old conspiracy out there, that Bill's mother was without mentioning any words, she was a whore in Arkansas, and the Rockefellers were running around there. Is there any significance to that story and that facility being there in Arkansas?
Well, you know what? See, and I when I hesitated when I said Arkansas, this particular one, it's not Arkansas. I think it's in the Appalachian area. Okay. But that's kind of like two different. I was hesitating because I'm 73 years old. I'm doing this off the top of my head, so sometimes Appalachian and Arkansas might get mixed up here. But there's nothing mixed up on my on the DVD. Okay, this is off the top of my head conversation. So periodically I may do it. But to answer your question, the Clintons, it was funny, and I have to get back just briefly to this. The Clintons are so criminal, I can't even tolerate thinking about it. Back during the Iran-Contra thing, okay, and I said, which was what had got me into this, all right? During the Iran-Contra things where they were taking weapons down, flying them to Panama, Manuel Noriega's Panama, and flying them into other areas down South America, and ending up in Nicaragua, the weapons going down, the same planes flew drugs back up. Barry Seal, the biggest American drug smuggler in the history of narcotics for the United States, was a good friend of the Clintons. Not only a good friend, but Bill Clinton signed off one time to get him out of jail. But to make it even better, I have live video on one of my exposés, the one called "Drugs and the CIA," that people can buy right now. You can get it yourself. That I have Roger Clinton snorting a line of cocaine, and he says to the guy he's with, "I got to get some of this for my brother. He's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner."
So let's, for the listeners, Roger Clinton is a brother of Bill. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And had been busted for narcotics. But the big point was the operations of Barry Seal were run out of Bill Clinton's Arkansas. It was the biggest supply as a private operation, all right, mixed. Barry Seal was being paid by the CIA even. It was a mix and an overlap, so to speak. And I have Oliver North's personal handwritten notes that I supplied the Senate and the Congress that they had never seen until they saw it from me. And it says, this is Oliver North's handwritten notes in a little spiral pad out of his breast pocket that says, be sure and supply an aircraft to pick up 1,500 kilos of MASH. Names the drug operatives. I have their bank accounts, which I supplied the government. I have all of that. I had all of his personal notes. And in reference to the weapons and narcotics of all of these people, I have all of those before they were ever redacted. And the United States Congress never saw them unredacted. That means marked off, blacked out. I supplied them all to the Congress during the Iran-Contra hearings.
So, Bob, what you're telling me is that Ollie North is not the Boy Scout he portrays himself to be?
He is a drug smuggler. He was convicted. He was convicted in Costa Rica of assisting in murder and drug smuggling, period. And he could never, if he went to Costa Rica today, he would be arrested and put in prison for the rest of his life.
Wow.
Oliver North.
Wow.
End of story. Now, let's get back to what's really going to bother us, because that's history, sports fans. That's old history. And the criminality there was mind-boggling. George Bush was involved with doing all of the Contra stuff, overseeing all of that, while he was being run against by Bill Clinton, when in fact they were holding hands because the Contras were being trained by George Bush's intelligence people in Arkansas, being set up and overseen by Bill Clinton. They were hand in hand in that whole thing. The idea that Bill Clinton and the Bushes don't like each other, that's garbage. They're buddies, period. Now, where were we? We were looking at...
Hold on 1 second. What did you just say? You said they are not buddies or they are buddies?
They are bosom buddies.
Oh, yeah, half-brother there.
Kissing cousins.
Yeah.
Because, hey, all of the criminality that was going on while Bush was in the presidency, and Ronald Reagan, and then Bush, and Ronald Reagan with Bush vice president, and then Bush as president, and all of that stuff, swapping out illegal arms all over the world, swapping for narcotics, was being done by both those administrations. And while it was being done, the narcotics suppliers, one of the big suppliers, Barry Seal, was Bill Clinton's buddy. They're drinking buddies.
So explain to us just for a second, who is Barry Seal? That name does
Barry Seal was a CIA / drug smuggler based out of Arkansas for 15 years, and he brought in more drugs individually himself, his operation, than you could ever even count. He was the biggest American drug smuggler in America, and he was close friends with the Clintons, and what can I say? And none of this is. I mean, this is all completely documented.
Mr. Fletcher, sir, how are you doing this evening?
I'm hanging in there, as they say. It's my pleasure to be on. I really appreciate it. Opportunity to share some of this outrageous information, unfortunately, that I've come across here once again. For those people who don't know who I am, I've been around for a long time. I've been chasing bad guys in government for 30 years. To get into the front part of my story, it takes quite a bit of time. So what I would simply say is this: many years ago, in the 80s, 86, 85, that period of time, I had a company. It was just it was actually a manufacturing company of toys. Had nothing to do with politics, could care less. Pretty much like the average American. I was just trying to make my way in the world, so to speak. And what happened, putting this into extremely compressed bit of information because I don't want to waste too much time on it, I merged my company with a company that already was in existence. It was presented to myself and was, in fact, an importing company of cheap watches. And it was perfect for my toy company. I merged with them, but the reality was it was only one of several companies that were run and operated by a man named Gary Best, who was, in fact, a supplier of weapons for the National Security Council, the NSA, and CIA. He supplied weapons along with partners of his who were the former generals that literally ran the entire Vietnam War and had run and supplied weapons for all of the little wars since the Vietnam episodes in the 60s. And what they were doing with my business, which I found out to my surprise, they have been doing it for many, many years. These covert operatives actually take companies like my own, my little toy company, and utilize them as covert front operations under which they can operate all around the world without drawing suspicion to themselves, supplying the weapons for all the small variety of covert operations that the United States maintains on a regular basis and makes the huge amounts of gold and profit into the pockets of those people that are involved. And that's how I got into it. And what had happened, I was at that time, those of you that are old enough to remember, that was during the period of the Iran-Contra scandal that was, of course, included, which most people never knew, huge amounts of drugs being traded by our Central Intelligence operatives for weapons that went into the wars all over the globe, actually, at that time. And of course, it was Nicaragua, and the Contras was the target initially at that point in time. So that's how I got into it. And of course, there's tremendous amount of fantastic, complex, exciting, and interesting stories that followed. Because what took place, I became a sworn witness, a deposed witness in the Iran-Contra mess, and then 2 or 3 other legal actions connected with that. I was a witness. And then on the basis of that, afterwards, every time there were similar kinds of events going on, drug smuggling and swap for weapons being transported illegally, and actions of different sorts around the globe, senators and congressmen, a few of them that were good, and there are very few, would contact me and say, "Hey, Mr. Fletcher, do you have anything that connects this one with that one? Can you help us out with this? Do you have information on these people carrying out events over here and over there?" And I ended up assisting in as many as 8 to almost maybe even as many as 12 above secret and top secret and standard inquiries into all of these outrageous events. And and it also included becoming a candidate for the United States Congress in 1990 in the state of Florida, running against a corrupted congressman at that time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I got into it. And since then, I've been chasing and been heavily involved with whistleblowing and witnessing and investigating a multitude of these types of related events.
Yeah.
Now,
your story is
throw it
quite
back to you. Go ahead. Excuse me.
I said your story is quite fascinating. There's a show on the air right now, a television show called Sons of Anarchy, about gun trafficking and drugs and things of that nature. Working with the IRA, that's dangerous business. Especially when you're involved with the government. Back in those days, I think people had a little more trust in the government than we do now. So you've transitioned, into Nibiru, your new video, Incoming Nibiru. I want to connect these two events because, if you peruse your website, BobFletcherInvestigations.com, you have a number of interesting photos and a great thesis out there regarding these underground bunkers that the government or someone is building out there. Is the cash connected from the gun running and the drugs connected to building these bunkers, or
well, it all is. Here's what happened. Again, realizing that I've just been up to my ankles, up to my neck in it, actually, I guess, for 30 years. And a couple of years ago, actually back in the 90s, I had testified before the United States Senate Intelligence Committee relative to several different things. But going back that far, first off, I had always constantly had people, like I indicated a few seconds ago, I always had people contacting me, and some of them were CIA operatives themselves. Some of them were retired. Some were military officers. Some of them were intelligence operatives at different levels. There was even an organization in Washington of retired intelligence agents that had even brought me in at one point in time and made me an honorary member. And I think I was maybe the only person that was an honorary member to retired intelligence agents. These guys were what I would consider mostly the good guys. Unfortunately, corruption in our government goes all the way up to the presidency and then comes back down. And it is so profuse at this point in time that if you believed